Let's move to Iran, the 13th consecutive day of anti-government protests that began in Tehran with market traders, businesses protesting the currency collapse, hyperinflation that's morphed into nationwide unrest against the theocratic regime in power since the toppling of the Shah in the late 70s. Now, demonstrations with increasing numbers over the crippling state of the economy and the difficulty to get by over government corruption that's blamed, along with US and UN sanctions, on the country for the state of the decline. Well, there have been protests, waves of them in decades gone by, brutality suppressed by the government. This time, we've been seeing images of statues linked to the government and the military toppled, calls for the Ayatollah to go, increasing calls from crowds for the exiled son of the ousted Shah to replace him. Then in the past 24 hours, a place that's already difficult to get access to quick and credible information, little to none. An internet blackout calling Iranian contacts in the country not going through. And a speech today by the Supreme Leader, the first since the start of the protest, warning of a clampdown to come.
Last night in Tehran and some other places, a bunch of vandals showed up and destroyed buildings belonging to their own country just to please the US president.
Well, President Trump, just before his actions of his military in Venezuela, had threatened to intervene against the Iranian leadership if, he said on Truth Social, they brutally suppressed protesters. He's been speaking today to Fox News about reports, according to some newspapers, quoting British and American intelligence, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei could be considering fleeing the country. This is what he said.
The Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has a plan B to go to Russia.
Or someplace, yeah. He's looking to go someplace.
Do you believe that Iran, you think the country is on the verge of collapsing?
Well, it could be. I mean, what they've done is in the past, they've started shooting the hell out of people, and all of a sudden people without any weapons whatsoever are standing there and you have machine guns gunning them down, or they take them to prisons and then hang them and kill them. So they played rough, and I said, if they do that, we're going to hit them very hard.
So if there is mass murder by the Iranian Ayatollahs and those leadership, you're pledging to the people of Iran that you will come to their aid.
I've said it very loud and very clear. Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Let's move to Switzerland. Let's bring in Ali VAEZ, a prominent Iranian-American expert on the country, director of the Iran program, senior advisor of the International Crisis Group, an independent think tank focusing on conflict prevention and resolution. Welcome back to France 24. It is great to have you on the program, Ali. I want to bring this to you in the past couple of minutes. This is from the exiled son of Iran's late Shah. This is Reza Pahlavi on social media saying this, an appeal to President Trump. Mr. President, this is an urgent, immediate call for your attention, your support and your action. Please be prepared to intervene to help the people of Iran. Let me ask what you make of that, and also when you see and hear chants using the exiled son of the Shah's name, how widespread is that?
Well, the simple answer is that no one really knows. For sure, the former crown prince is doing better in the opinion of many in Iran. He's seen as a potential redeemer of the country who could rescue it from this very disastrous situation that the country is in, as his grandfather did in the 1920s. But the odds of his support have increased, maybe from 5% to 10%, or from 10% to 40%. No one knows for sure. But I don't think he's yet seen as a consensus leader, as a unifier, as someone with the position that Ayatollah Khomeini was in the run-up to the 1979 revolution.
There's a number of things just to run by you. First of all, we heard from President Trump. It's without evidence, saying that he believes there's a contingency plan, a plan B, that Ayatollah Khamenei is looking to flee, possibly to Moscow. It appears to have been sourced to British, American intelligence sources. Is that credible to you?
It does not sound credible. Look, the Supreme Leader is 86. He's a man who was imprisoned in the run-up to the revolution, was sent into exile, then after the revolution was the subject of assassination attempt. And at this stage in his life, I think he would prefer to go down fighting rather than to flee into exile. So it doesn't really sound credible, but it's also, we're not yet at a point that the regime is on the verge of collapse. It is serious, it's facing a serious threat, no doubt about it. But it is not yet on the brink. So I think these reports are mostly hype.
When you look at the past week and the information coming in, suddenly starting to seize up in the midst of this internet blackout, is that an ominous sign now, Ali, to you?
It certainly is. It demonstrates that the regime is more and more concerned, and that is why in the early days of these protests, where the numbers of people on the street were measured in the thousands, it really didn't react that much. And the president of Iran was talking about dialogue with the protesters. When the numbers went higher to tens of thousands on the streets and the geographic scope of it was expanded, then you saw the regime starting to crack down. And as of last night, when the numbers went into hundreds of thousands, then we see now a internet blackout and the regime bringing down the iron fist. So it is clearly a sign of the fact that they are getting more and more concerned.
I'd like to know your thoughts on why it's so ominous right now. If I'm right in saying, go back to previous demonstrations in 2009, after the elections, disputed results and others, that there have been previous blackouts, and within that blackout came the suppression. It wasn't recorded or couldn't be sent out quickly. Is that a sense of why it's a dangerous point? And also, just to follow up on that, you talk about the thousands that have made it out onto the streets, these big gatherings in towns and cities. We've seen images of toppling of statues. To which point would you say, is there a kind of turnover period when it moves from unrest to an uprising?
Well, I think we're already there. You know, the reality is that if you look at the course of the past 8 years, protests in Iran, nationwide protests, are becoming more frequent and every time more violent. And it's a function of the fact that the Iranian people believe that they have reached a dead end with this regime. Across the board, from socioeconomic indicators to environmental crisis, water shortages, it's really a disaster across the board. And the regime has failed at every turn to bring about meaningful reforms or improve the people's economic well-being. And so there is this pent-up frustration that easily is ignited and people pour to the streets. The question, however, remains, you know, in order for these movements to move from upheavals and uprisings into a revolutionary movement, you need two ingredients that we're still not seeing. One is cracks at the top, which is, for now, there's still no evidence of it. There are no defections. And second is the security forces basically joining the rest of the population. And that hasn't happened either. So as long as those two factors continue, I'm afraid that these movements are still vulnerable to the two elements that brought them down in the past, which is fear and fatigue.
Very interesting. Ali, let me also run this by you. The Economist this week running the headline, facing protests at home or abroad, quote, the Iranian regime looks rattled. They quote one economist, Ali VAEZ, who is urging the Ayatollah to step down in favour of a, quote, Bonaparte figure. This is somebody that the regime is said to have trusted in the past. And they're discussing one particular character, Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf, a parliamentary speaker, former IRGC commander. Tell me about him and tell me about whether you think there is movement at all within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Is that plausible?
Look, Mr. Ghalibaf is a very ambitious man. He's run for the presidency multiple times and is now the Speaker of the Parliament. He was a commander of the Revolutionary Guards. No doubt that he wants to ascend to even higher office. And there are elements within the system that are now increasingly thinking that what President Trump has done in Venezuela, which is to remove the top layer, but to allow the rest of the structure to survive, is a formula that they can live with. And given the age of the supreme leader, that kind of transition is going to happen just based on biological factors anyway. So why not expedite it and push him aside and try to preserve their vested economic and political interest in the system, but just by changing the face of it. But that's much easier said than done. Unlike in the case of Venezuela, there are very limited contacts between different elements of the Islamic Republic and the United States. And there are people on the streets protesting against this regime in a way that we didn't see in Venezuela, even after Maduro's removal. So it's a tall order to imagine that could happen.
Now, you and I think, would be fools to try to guess what President Trump might do. When we listen to Marco Rubio saying that, if you didn't know, now you know. F around, find out, said Pete Hegseth. Yet he said many things that he hasn't carried up on, just as he did with Venezuela and did follow up on it. But if you're looking at this situation now, is it too early for you to work out where this is heading? Do you have a sense of what could come next?
It is really impossible to predict because, as you said, President Trump has demonstrated that he's unpredictable. If he wants to intervene, as he has pledged to do now 3 times in case of rising fatalities in Iran, his options are more limited than was the case in Venezuela. Because what President Trump likes to do is high impact, low cost. And in the case of Iran, we saw that even when Iran was in the midst of a major war with Israel, he opted for a very limited military intervention. The U.S. only bombed Iran for 45 minutes. And so if he is to intervene, especially in the Middle East, where the U.S. public and his base have lots of bad memories of mission creep, it will be a difficult thing to do for a regime that is now not just paranoid, but prepared also for scenarios similar to what Israel did to Nasrallah, political decapitation in Lebanon, or Maduro's kidnapping in Venezuela.
Final thought, just to round up where we started actually, on Reza Pahlavi, his quote, he'd already called for people to come out onto the streets this week, now he's calling for President Trump to intervene. Can you set out, to those watching, trying to understand who the rallying figures are, and this is somebody many demonstrators appear to be rallying around, why his name isn't black and white, and why isn't there a unified position on him? There are critics, I think, of Mr. Pahlavi saying he's simply too close to Israel, but that could also work in his advantage. What's your take?
Look, again, it's hard to come up with a very accurate answer to that question because we don't have reliable surveys of what the Iranian people think about these things. I'm sure there are some people who see an advantage in the fact that Mr. Pahlavi is supported by Israel, which sees no limit in pursuing its goals in the region these days and wants to get rid of the Iranian regime, is less risk averse than the United States. But there are also some people who remember the high civilian death toll during Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran and blame Mr. Pahlavi for siding with the aggressor. So there are really mixed views about him, about the history of his family. Remember that there was a popular revolution 46 years ago that toppled his father. But there are also, again, some nostalgia about the monarchy and about his grandfather who rescued Iran from a very similar dilemma that it faced about 100 years ago. So it's really a mixed image and hard to say whether he would be able to come up on the top. But even if he does, in terms of being opposition abroad, he still needs a network inside the country. The reason Khomeini succeeded in the 1970s was that in addition to it being a charismatic leader and being very smart about what he was doing, he also had a network of mosques and charitable organizations in Iran who were doing his bidding on the ground. And that seems to be lacking for the opposition abroad.
Really good to talk to you, as always, Ali. Thank you for your time. Ali VAEZ in Switzerland. Thank you. Director of the Iran Project and the Senior Advisor, too, for the International Crisis Group.